Did you know that there has been at least one death caused by hazing every year since 1972? For many fraternities or sororities, hazing is a ritual. It often involves copious amount of drinking, rigorous physical activities, and sometimes disgusting activities. But how does it happen so often? You can't imagine any of these individuals involved in the hazing that could actually lead to someone's death, or for any of the victims to drink so much alcohol on their own. Well, individuals don't haze themselves. But being in a group, especially a fraternity or a sorority, can seriously change a person's behavior. In order to allow many hazing activities to happen, there has to be some level of something psychologists call deindividualization. Deindividualization may lead people to do or say things that they wouldn't normally do outside of a group. It can be downright dangerous in fraternities, sororities, and religious organizations or at political protest. But not all of deindividualization is unhealthy or violent. This video breaks down the definition of deindividualization and what it means for people within large organizations. Staying aware of deindividualization and how it may affect your thinking can help you maintain a strong sense of self even when you're in a large crowd. So first off, what is deindividualization? Deindividualization is a process in which an individual loses their sense of self whenever they're in a group. They instead identify with the group's mentality, even if that would normally clash with their own. These individuals lose their ability to step away from the group and assess their actions, feelings, beliefs, and behavior. Instead, the group's actions, feelings, beliefs, and behavior become the individuals, and so they begin to act in accordance with the group. Now you might be wondering, how does this happen? Well, there's a few reasons why individuals lose their sense of self, especially when surrounded by a large group. The first thing is called the bystander effect, also known as diffusion of responsibility. So, who is responsible for stopping the violent behavior of a large group? A lot of people ask this question. In a large group, who is responsible for stepping in or helping someone who may be in distress? One could argue that everyone has that responsibility. So, why should you act if someone else is going to help? The diffusion of responsibility is a form of attribution in which other people assume that someone else should be responsible for taking action. Maybe you think the guy next to you is more responsible because he's bigger or stronger. Or maybe the person closest to two people fighting should be responsible for breaking it up, just by the law of proximity. The more people you see in a crowd, the more people you can give your responsibility to. This is a big problem. Second, we have anonymity. When you're standing alone, people can only identify you as who you are. But when you're in a crowd, you may feel that you've lost that option. You are instead identified as someone in the crowd. With anonymity and without responsibility, you may act in ways that you wouldn't normally if you knew you were being held responsible. A third reason is suggestibility. So when people don't know what to say or what to do, the first thing they do is they look to others around them. So in or out of a crowd, they allow others to fill in the blanks. This suggestibility may lead you to remember things incorrectly, change your opinion of what you believe, or act in certain ways. And in a crowd, you may witness many people directly or indirectly suggesting that you believe something or maybe act in a certain way. And it's hard not to believe that when a whole bunch of people are suggesting it to be so. So those are three reasons that may support deindividualization: the diffusion of responsibility, anonymity, and suggestibility. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the history of deindividualization, because these ideas are not new to the world of social psychology. In 1895, a French psychologist published a book called The Crowd. The book suggested that when people form a crowd, the ideas of the crowd take over. Similar to a contagious virus, everyone gets swept up. He also suggested that the crowd's mentality is intellectually weak, emotional, and brings people to a more primitive level. It's kind of like the only as strong as the weakest point idea, so that everyone in the crowd can then be involved. The author, Gustave Le Bon, his work inspired many psychologists to build onto these ideas. But it wasn't until 1952 that the term deindividualization was used. Psychologists Leon Festinger, Albert Pipitone, and Theodore Newcomb are often credited as the first to coin the term deindividualization. They expanded on Le Bon's ideas, setting the foundation for the idea of deindividualization into the concept as we know it today. Moving forward, in 1969, Philip Zimbardo suggested that normally inhibited behavior wasn't something that just resulted in hazing or political violence. He expanded the ideas of deindividualization to include more positive examples, which I'll get to in a minute. Now, of course, Zimbardo isn't exactly tied to positive results himself, and if you've seen my video on the Stanford prison experiment, you might remember that Zimbardo was behind the entire demonstration. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you to watch it after this video. So as with all the ideas in social psychology, researchers have continued to define and develop the idea of de-individualization to fit into the ever-changing world. And now, I want to get into some examples about de-individualization. And I started talking about fraternities. Not all examples of de-individualization involve hazing, violence, or Greek letters. You may have experienced some of these examples actually yourself. Take running a marathon. Not every runner in the race could, or would, run 26.2 miles at one time. But whenever you're in a big crowd, everyone's adrenaline is pumping and the runners are super motivated to make it to the finish line. It may be easier to put your doubts and your fears away and just keep running with the pack. The same could be said for a long day of volunteering. You might not be inclined to plant a few dozen trees out in the woods or deliver a dozen meals to the homeless if you're alone, but whenever you're in a group, it doesn't seem like work. It's more motivating to go out with a group of people who are committed to braving the cold or to helping others all day. Then, of course, you might see de-individualization happen in religious organizations. You might go feed the hungry with your religious group, or in some extreme cases, you might even go to war on behalf of your religious ideals. It's very easy to get swept up in more extreme beliefs and actions whenever you have a group of followers justifying what you're doing. De-individualization is a large word, but it doesn't just happen in cults or fraternities. And it doesn't always just lead to bad things. But the more you understand and stay aware of this process, the easier it will be to step aside whenever things go against your individual morals. Stay mindful, stay aware, and stay grounded in what you believe, even if you're in a crowd of de-individualized people who may be acting in a different way. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video on de-individualization, and I hope you learned something. If you have any questions at all, feel free to leave a comment below or check out the other social psychology videos in this series. I'll see you in the next video.